White feminists are ethno-nationalist Chinese Nazi sympathizers. In this video, we're going to take a look at the progression of the Chinese quote-unquote Nazi or Chinese quote-unquote communist/Nazi party progression from communism into their more advanced, evolved version of communism, where the Han ruling class has private property and money, but they tell everybody else that they're communists so they don't have to pay the slaves. And we're going to look into the strange bedfellow coalition that developed in between Black Lives Matter and white feminists, a racist form of feminism where they put white women at the top, and how they have become ethno-nationalist Chinese Nazi sympathizers. Yes, you heard that right. A very bold claim, but I have evidence to back it up. So here, let's delve into it. All right, first we're going to look in Wikipedia in a list of massacres that have occurred in China in the past 100 years. So we have, starting in 1949, when the psycho-terrorist communists took over and started mass slaughtering all the capitalists because they didn't want to share equally with everyone. This is excluding the deaths from the Great Chinese Famine that occurred after people were unable to feed themselves because of the scourge of communism. And in that famine, between 15 and 55 million Chinese people starved to death. So starting here, Mao Zedong in the Chinese land reform, when they went through and slaughtered all the landlords and jacked their property, they killed between about 1 million and 4.7 million people. In the campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries, i.e. the far-right extremists, they mass slaughtered between 712,000 to 2 million people. In the here in this other 3 anti and 5 anti campaigns, another at least 876 in the Sufan movement. There was 53,000 people slaughtered. In the anti-rightist campaign, where they were targeting the far-right extremists, they killed at least 550,000 people. In Zhonghua incident, they mass slaughtered 435 people. In the 1959 Tibetan uprising, they mass slaughtered 87,000 people. These are their own people, too. In the violence in the Great Chinese Famine, they killed 2.5 million people. And in the socialist education movement, they killed 77,560 people. Now we're going to go into the cultural de-evolution, aka the Cultural Revolution. And this was when they determined that it wasn't Marxism that failed. It was the culture, and that it was the culture that was bad, that the people were racist, and that they had to get rid of them, eliminate their culture off the face of the planet. And in the Red August, in August through September of 1966, they mass slaughtered 1,772 people in Beijing. In the Guangxi massacre from 1966 to 1976, they slaughtered between 100,000 and 150,000 people. And there was massive amount of cannibalism that had occurred. In the Inner Mongolia incident, they slaughtered between 16,632 to 100,000, mostly Mongols. In the Qinghai massacre, they slaughtered 173. In Guangzhou Laogai, between 187 and 197 people were massacred. In the anti-Peng Pai incident, over 160 people were massacred. In Qinguang Tui incident. Boy, my pronunciation of this is pretty bad here. Approximately 101 people were slaughtered. In Yangjiang massacre, about 3,573 were massacred. In Doizhang, approximately 9,093 were massacred. In Soiyang County massacre, they slaughtered about 991 people. In Dang County massacre, this was in 1968, they slaughtered over 700 people. In the Ruijing massacre, over 1,000 people were slaughtered. In the Zhao Jingming spy case, over 17,000 people were killed, over 1.3 million people persecuted. In the Shandian incident, about 1,600 people were massacred. And then between 1976 and 1999, in the Tibetan unrest, over 10 people were massacred. In Tiananmen Square protest of 1989, which is probably the most famous of all on the list for us people in the West, between 200 and 10,000 people were massacred. And, you know, the Chinese government is going to tell you all day long that it was only 200 people and they were all accidents. In the Thousand Islands Lake robbery killings, about 32 people were massacred. In Gualjia incident, about 9 people were massacred. Long Winds Round robbery was 23 people massacred. And from between 2000 to present, in the 2008 Tibetan unrest, they slaughtered between 20 and 150 people. In 2008, in the Kashgar attack, they killed 17 people. In July 2009, Urumqi riots, they killed 197 people. So there's a lot of them here. I'm going to skip the rest of these. So we're going to look at the amount of deaths. So we could see that they were mass slaughtering all kinds of people for quite a while. And then they chilled off on the mass slaughtering. Okay? So credit where credit is due. They have become less genocidal in public, but most people, they think that the Chinese people are innocent and that because they're a minority group and that if you criticize them that you're racist. And so there's a reason for this. In fact, the Chinese government, in fact, has been using racism as a method to attack and control people. If you criticize the Chinese Nazi Party, you are if you criticize the Chinese Nazi Party, then you are, sorry, I spaced out mid-flight. Then you're racist against Chinese people. So what they're doing is they have the Chinese Nazi Party, and they're still called colloquially the Chinese Communist Party, but I'm going to prove to you that they're National Socialists. They've been doing a cyber warfare campaign against us, and so according to Wikipedia, which I am going to hark on how bunk it is, but they are good for certain things. So they have between 50,000 and 100,000 Chinese military personnel doing cyber war against the United States at any given time. Chances are these people have broken into your computers in your home before, and they've probably looked at your porn on your computer, all your pictures of you and your wife or your husband, and they probably have accessed your email before. These people have been doing these operations for quite a while. A friend of mine helped make one of the first Apple computers, and he worked on some chips for some missiles for some big companies that carried some nuclear warheads. And he told me that they used to be able to see the Chinese spies trying to spy on them in San Francisco. They could see with telescopes. They could see these spies trying to get information on the chips. And they had these protocols that they had to go through in order to keep the stuff safe because, you know, they're working on chips for missiles, for nukes. So this stuff's been going on for a while. The Chinese have this strategy called rob, replicate, and replace. And what they do is they steal all of our intellectual property. They undercut our manufacturing ability. They make it so if you want to get your products made there, you have to go bribe a quote unquote communist party boss by giving him money in order to access the slave labor in the place. They're manipulating their currencies. You know, they were supposed to take our help and transfer away from communism. And so they should be capitalist right now. But what they did was they set up these regions like in Hong Kong, and they made it so that these were like special free trade regions. For instance, Dubai is a free trade region in the United Arab Emirates. And the reason for this is because Muslim laws are not really conducive to capitalism and our cultures. So they set up this free trade zone, Dubai. They they made all this really tall skyscrapers like the Burj Dubai in order to create a space to bring Western entrepreneurs so that they could have a safe haven where they could operate their businesses. And so this was supposed to be what Hong Kong and Taiwan are. It was supposed to be one country, two parties. And they were supposed to transition from communism into capitalism with our help. But this did not end up happening. What ended up happening was that the dictator Xi Jinping, who looks just like Winnie the Pooh, if you look at pictures of okay, I don't know why that wasn't on DuckDuckGo. Maybe I misspelled it. So if you notice, this guy, Xi Jinping, the dictator of communist sorry, I'm trying to load up this image. I'm having troubles with it. So this guy, Zinni the Pooh, they're like chopped off. What you'll notice is that this guy, Xi Jinping, he looks like Winnie the Pooh, and Obama actually kind of looks like Tigger in this picture. Here's a better one. Okay. I'm tired of that, man. Got to copy the image location and then go to it. And then, I'm sorry, nothing's working right now. This one better. Right. Okay. Here's a way better one. Apologize about the problems there. I don't know. They didn't make it easy to make it go full screen. So this dictator of China, this guy has such thin skin that they banned Winnie the Pooh from China. Like, you literally can't show pictures of Winnie the Pooh because this guy's got such thin skin about people saying that he looks like Winnie the Pooh that they'll attack you. They got a social credit score system over there in Nazi China where they have a surveillance state and they're monitoring every movement of people. If you criticize the government, you don't get any money, you're exiled. And they have these Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps. So you've probably seen these images of the Uyghur Muslims here being loaded up into trains, going to concentration camps. They're forced labor re-education camps. China is annihilating an ethnicity of people off the face of the planet. Here's an image of a dead child who froze to death after their parents were put into a concentration re-education camp to eliminate their ethnicity of people off the face of the planet. This is genocide. What is going on here? So the Chinese Communist Party is, they're hardcore ethno-nationalists. These people, they're Han Chinese supremacists. They believe that Chinese people are destined to rule the world, that they want China to be the world's #1 superpower. And the Chinese Nazi Party has been losing power because of the capitalism there. There's rampant capitalism. People are selling stuff alongside the roads all over the place. There's money flooding into the communist areas where you're not supposed to have money. And there's open corruption. If you want to get stuff manufactured, if you want to sell in China, you have to pay off these Chinese Nazi Party bosses. If you criticize the Chinese Nazi Party, they blacklist you. So from posting this video, if the Chinese Nazi Party gets a hold of this, I will be blacklisted. I own a company, and I will not be allowed to sell in China. And if you want to get into the Chinese market, you got to pay off these Nazi Party bosses with bribes so that you can use their slave labor. So they've undercut our ability to compete in the manufacturing arena. They've made it so that they are manufacturing key electronics components and other components that you need for military, for advanced technology. And they're utilizing this in order to piggyback us, especially since we got hit hard by the COVID pandemic. They're wanting to be the world's #1 superpower, and they're fiercely competitive. So in communism, it's supposed to be a flat social hierarchy. So communism is supposed to mean that you don't have money, you don't have classes, there's no like rich people, and that everybody is equal. Anyone can rise up from being impoverished to being a multi-million, or hold on, that can rise up to do whatever they want in the economy. So like you're not constricted by money. But the problem here is that that they have hundreds of millions of impoverished Chinese out in the countryside, and they have filthy, stinking, rich Chinese in the city, and they're utilizing a dual system where some people have money, they have a lot of property, they're filthy, stinking rich, they're second generation rich, so they grew up rich all their life, they have all of this privileged access, and it's a communist country, right? So obviously this is a problem. So what they've done is they've weaponized left-right politics on us. Most people are clueless about what is going on Wikipedia. It's been radicalized. So most people don't know what left-right politics means. And they think it's like this proper analogy that like you can view the world through, like it's a lens. That when you see the world, you could see two sides. You could see a left and a right. And so what this is meant to do is it's meant to polarize people, to create division where either side that you choose, you're going to be choosing the sides of the ruling party. This happens in every authoritarian country, that they create two false choices where either way you vote, you're still voting for the dictator. So left-right politics means on the left, you have flat social hierarchies or no social hierarchies. And then on the right, you have non-flat social hierarchies. So people think that like if you support universal healthcare, that makes you a leftist. This isn't true. That's not actually what left-right politics means. No, very specifically, it means that there's a social hierarchy that exists currently. You're in it, you're somewhere. Okay, you might start out as a fast food worker, and then you get a 2-year college degree. Next thing you know, you're an automotive tech. And then you move up from automotive tech to mechanical engineer. You start out down at the bottom, and then you move up to manager. Then you move up to tech lead. Then you move up to head designer. So this is an example of a hierarchy. Hierarchies aren't bad. They're a good thing. But the problem is these leftists, what they want to do is they want to make it so that there's no barriers between the people who manage to end up at the bottom to moving all the way up to the top. It's like they want to make it so that, you know, you live in a perfect utopia where there's nobody, like the bosses never say no to you. So like every person hires you because you're all equal, and this is just a farce. It's crazy to think this. The reason being is because us humans, we need to move up in the world in order to be happy. Like, we need to get a raise at work. We need to feel like our work is valued and that we are moving up. And so we do this through hierarchical movement. So the fact that you have universal healthcare, the way that you're paying for the healthcare, the way the insurance runs, has absolutely nothing to do with left versus right politics. There's no social hierarchy that's involved in you being able to see a doctor, except for the fact that they only let the smart people be the doctors, right? Do you want the people who are like the dropout drug addicts at the fast food restaurant to be the doctors that are caring for you when you're about to die? Okay, no, you absolutely do not want that. No, we want to take the best of the best from the schools, and we want to put them into positions where they can work within themselves to create their own hierarchies, to have their own system, to where we can have a scientific method, to where we can see which one of these docs are quacks, which one of these docs are the brightest, and how we could, in order to give reputability to scientific documentation when people distribute research papers, scientific information, you have to be able to look at it. And you have to be able to know, I know that this source comes from some really reputable doctors. These people are extremely smart. They're the best of the best. They came from the best school, right? So the very notion that you would have doctors who got good grades from the good universities that are working through government-sponsored healthcare, like, there's nothing that's on the left about this. There's a social hierarchy. There's a doctor, there's a nurse, there's an EMT. There's a hierarchy that you go up. This is called a hierarchy. And this is on the right. This is not on the left at all. So people, they look at this, they make this assumption, oh, I like the feeling of thinking that I'm supporting equality. Right? Because it makes me sound like I'm a good person, and I might get canceled. I might get fired from my job if people think that I'm racist, sexist, misogynist, xenophobic, transphobic, and please tell me that wasn't the camera. Dang it. Hey, I got another camera. Just wait. Dang it. I'm so sorry, the battery died. But I got another camera that's like USB. It'll be just one moment. Sorry about that. The battery died. I thought it was good. I thought it trickle charged, but it didn't. So people, they want to feel like they're on the side of right, like they're doing, like they're the one of the good people, and that they're not one of these bad racist white supremacist people who's been oppressing minorities. So people, they've gotten brainwashed by this notion of left and right. So what we've done is we've created a group where we have a litmus test in order to be a part of this group. This is bad. Litmus test to be a part of the group means that you've created an in-group and an out-group. If they think that you are a white supremacist, a white nationalist, or a xenophobe, or a sexist person, they're going to cut you out of their social circles. This means that they have created a social hierarchy where they have an in-group. If you want to get a job, if you want to get money, if you want to rise up, then you have to participate in their corporate structure, in which case they're going to be able to cancel you, because in their workplace, we have institutionalized anti-racism. They keep saying that this is systemic racism. No, this is a lie, okay? Absolute lie. There's no truth to it. The truth is that in the United States, we have laws against racism by employers. We have the Civil Rights Act. So the United States government can get sued by people if they are discriminated against minority groups. So what this has done is it's created a method for people to get people fired. So I used to live in Virginia. This was a deep red state until mass immigration brought in a bunch of Latino immigrants, and then most Latinos vote for Democrats, and then it switched it from a red state to a blue state. Since that has happened, Washington, D.C. has gone off the deep end with the leftist Democrat politics. So they say that black people are discriminated against because there's too many black people who are cleaning the floors in Washington, D.C. They say this is systemic racism. The senators from the states where there's mostly white people are white, and the people who are cleaning the floors are black, right? They're like, you've created this steep social hierarchy. So they're saying this is far right, racist. So on Wikipedia, they start going off on this insane nonsense. So hold on, wait. So black people are 13.3% of the United States population, but they hold 18% of federal government jobs. All right. So they're complaining. They're saying this is racism. This is racism because there's so many people cleaning the floors who are black. But what they're totally discounting is they got those sweet government jobs. There's a lot of black people in Washington, D.C. That's why there's so many people cleaning the floor, because there's a lot of people that live there in the area, right? So there's a heavy black presence and the people, there's a lot of, I lived in Charlottesville. Like my mom was in the scene with like Dave Matthews. Like Dave Matthews asked my mom on a date once. And so like we knew a lot of hippies. Like people do like samba and Afro-Cuban music. And so I know there's a lot of like really good people, and like they don't mean wrong. But there's a certain group of people that complain about racism because they blame racism on everything. So there's a certain group of guys that will blame women for all of their problems. And then we call those guys misogynist, or that's not really a good definition for them. I'm going to go over that, why that's actually a false definition here shortly. But so there's this group of people in the Washington, D.C. area. They're Democrats. They're anti-racist. They think there's a conspiracy by the white supremacists to suppress the minority groups, and that they're underpaying minorities and that they're underpaying women. And this group of people is what we refer to as the deep state. So people think deep state, that's a crazy conspiracy theory. This is wrong. There's actually a deep state in every single government. It's called a dual state in political science. They study it in colleges. What it is it's crony networks of people who give their friends jobs over other people's. So what this does when you create a deep state, so for instance, Israel, their deep state is the Zionist. So every once in a while, we have to put up with some ethno-nationalism from the Jews. So ethno-nationalism means that it's a nation that has a ethnic identity, such as a Islamic state or a white or an Aryan state. A lot of people don't know what those people were doing. The Nazis were they were eugenics people, and they were trying to cull the herd to get rid of the bad genetics to create a master race. They thought they were the master race, but they weren't actually. They were trying to create a master race with some scientific social Darwinism bullshit, like some nasty, primitive pseudoscience with like scientific racism. So this whole notion of far left and far right, what it means is that on the farthest left, you have the flat social hierarchies, and the farthest possible left, the flattest possible hierarchy is anarchy. That's where nobody controls anybody. Left next to that is anarcho-communism. Next to that is communism. And then you've got a spectrum of socialism. And then on the far right, you have your steep social hierarchies. And this is your National Socialism, your Sharia law, because they execute non-believers, chop off your hand. They do a lot of things. They have an in-group because it's Sharia law. So that means that the in-group is the Muslims, and that everyone else, they're an infidel, they're subhuman. We can execute you underneath their laws. That's what their religion states. And so this creates a steep social hierarchy. And so the far right, so what they've done is they've expanded. So what you got is you got a bunch of crackpot lefties. You've got corporate interest that like there's corporations that control PR for people, and there are far leftists who actually believe in communism and radical feminism. And so like they control Wikipedia. And so what they've done is they've expanded this definition of far right to include anything that they don't like, pretty much. So it says far right politics, also referred to as the extreme right or right-wing extremism, are politics further on the left-right political spectrum than the standard political right, particularly in terms of being anti-communist, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist, and having nativist ideology and tendencies. So why is anti-communism the first thing up on the list? What on earth does being against communism have to do with far right? Like, the United States was against communism and fascism, like the far left and the far right, right? So they say historically has been used to describe experiences of Nazism and fascism. Today, the far right politics includes neo-fascism, neo-Nazism, third position, alt-right, radical supremacism, and other ideologies or organizations that feature aspects of ultra-nationalistic, chauvinist, which means patriotic. People think that's male chauvinist, but like chauvinist means you're patriotic. Male chauvinist means that they're like they believe in the dominance of males. So patriots believe in the dominance of their own country. So are xenophobic, theocratic. So like Israel is far right. Under the victims of the Nazi Holocaust, they're far right. Racist, homophobic, transphobic, or reactionary views. And so far-right politics can lead to oppression, political violence, forced assimilation, ethnic cleansing, and genocide against groups of people based on their supposed inferiority or their perceived threat to the native ethnic group, nation state, national religion, dominant culture, or ultra-conservative traditionalist conservatism, social institutions. So what this means is anything that they don't like is far right. Anything that's against China is far right. So let's go back to this original definition of left versus right politics. On the left, we have the flat social hierarchies where there's no social hierarchy. Like the existing social hierarchy that's there is gone. Everybody's equal. Everybody's sitting around the campfire. Oops. Sorry. Having trouble singing Kumbaya. Everybody's just sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya. It's like happily ever after. There's no more war. There's no more strife. It's all just peachy gravy. Nobody's got any sort of problems anymore. And so obviously that we're not all sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya. We're not. So what? Sorry, just trying to be closer there. The left versus right politics has been weaponized in order to drum up support for political parties in order to attack people. So this doesn't really make any sense. So people think that if you go farther to the right, then like if you get more conservative, if you get more Republican, then you turn out far right. And so there's a problem with this, and it's being a conservative means a different thing in every country. So like, what does it mean to conserve culture, tradition, and way of life in the United States? What is our way of life? Freedom of speech. We have the Civil Rights Act. We've got the court system. We've got equal pay for women. And a lot of like workplace employment rules, like against sex discrimination, sex harassment, all that kind of stuff. So really, in the United States, if you get more conservative, you get more into limited government. And limited government is the opposite of a steep social hierarchy. So a steep social hierarchy means that there's authoritarianism, that there is a preference towards the native population, that they're ultra-nationalist. So it means like you have to support the current government, like China. Yeah, right. Because they got the dictator. They've got Zinni the Pooh, right? Who looks just like Winnie the Pooh. And Obama, he looks just like Tigger, right? So they got the dictator there of China, and they're doing this genocide of the Uyghur Muslims, and our corporations that are manufacturing products over there are complicit in it. In fact, you might even be wearing jeans that contain cotton picked by Uyghur Muslim slaves, and you don't even know it. I mean, chances are pretty high that the cotton, if your pants were made in a supply line that touched China, then chances are you're using Xinjiang slave labor cotton picked by Uyghur Muslims in the concentration camps before their ethnicity disappears off the face of the planet. So you should hold on to those genes, because it might be one of the last memories of the Uyghur people, because the Chinese Nazi Party, what they did in this cultural de-evolution. So in the Cultural Revolution, when they went around slaughtering people, what they said was it wasn't Marxism that failed. It was the culture. So we have to get rid of the culture. And then they started mass slaughtering people, stealing their land. And let's see, this was before, that was after. The Cultural Evolution was after the famine, right? So they stole the owners' lands in the night. We went over this list of the genocides. So Mao Zedong came to power, and then they went and stole the landlord's lands. They took the productive capitalist farm. They were like, these capitalists out here in the country, they got these farms and they're making so much money. This isn't right. They need to share equally with the people. So they killed the farmers. They jacked their land. And then they let a bunch of communists take it over and control it. And none of them knew how to run a farm. And the farm started to decay. And then eventually it became non-functional. And there was lines for bread that were 3 miles long. And whenever you would get to the front of the line, they would be out of bread. So that's what happened in the Great Chinese Famine, where they were unable to feed themselves because of the Chinese. And then it wasn't the fact that they took the productive capitalist farm and they killed the owners and they gave the farm to lazy communists who didn't know how to run farms. It was the culture. So they have to annihilate it. They have to get rid of all the culture. So what happens is you get a lot of people in the cities will start supporting socialism. And then the people out in the countryside, there's not enough people to run the socialist scam. Like they can't grow food there. They're like dependent on the people out in the country in order to get their food. In order to do that, you need to trade with them. In order to trade with them, you need money, right? So for a farmer, it's incredibly obvious that he needs to grow his food and then take it to market and sell it. But to a communist, they think that this farmer is got too much money, that they're being greedy and they need to go jack the dude and take over the farm. And then whenever they get out to the farm, they realize how hard it was to do the work. And then they're unable to do the work. And then it goes into a state of decay. So what ended up happening is they got hundreds of millions of these impoverished Chinese out in the countryside. They tell them, you're communist. And then in the city, they're living high on the hog. So they got this steep social hierarchy. And then they got these Uyghur Muslims in the concentration camps, forced labor re-education camps, where they're annihilating their ethnicity off the face of the planet. And the corporations run by the Democrats are complicit in this. So let's go into the next phase here. There's the, I'm going to show to you the 4-tier racial caste hierarchy that the Democrats have created with their diversity tickets. So what you're seeing here is a chart of the GPAs of the various races in the United States. So the ones with the best grades are the Asians, and they are here at the top with the average 3.26 GPA in 2009. Here's the white people's GPA, it's about 3.9. Here's the Latinos, 2.84, not that far behind. And then the African Americans are 2.69. And so if you look in the corner here in the graph, what you're going to see is you're going to see a chart of the incomes of the various races. And what you're going to see at the bottom, so we got the African Americans. Above them is the Hispanics. Sorry, the African Americans are at what? About 30,000 a year. Hispanics about 40,000 a year. White people about 55,000 a year. Asian people about 65,000 a year. So let's break this down. How much money they're making? So let's look at this. Here's the median household income of the Asians. And so what you can see is that the Indian Americans make the most, median household income of 126,705. Taiwanese are next with 102,405 a year. Filipinos, 100,000. 273. Indonesian Americans, 93,501. Pakistani Americans, 87,509. Chinese Americans, 85,424. Japanese Americans, $85,007 per year. Korean Americans, 76,674 per year. Hmong Americans are 73,373. Vietnamese Americans, $72,038 a year. Cambodian Americans, $72,038 per year. Bangladeshi Americans, $67,944 per year. Bangladeshi Americans, $67,763 per year. Thai Americans, $66,763 per year. Laotian Americans, 66,117. And then white Americans come in here at last on this chart at 65,902. And that's because the white guys are falling behind. Our test scores are pretty low, and it's caused women to get about 2/3 of the college degrees coming out of college. And now we got like the opiate epidemic, and there's chronic homelessness, and the people got job gaps, and it's killing their salaries. So we got a lot of problems. So when we look at this graph, what we see here is that your GPA, the lower your GPA is, the higher. This is a graph of people who've voted for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And here we could see in the quarter, we could see a height map of where the Democrats lived who voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And what you could see is that almost every big city in the United States is controlled by Democrats. These Democrats are also in control of the corporations that are there, and they're hyper competitive, and they won't hire you if you have a low GPA. So the lower your GPA is, we have a chart here of the percents of each of the races that voted for Democrats, and you can see the lower your GPA is, the higher percentage of your race voted for Democrats. Okay, and also too, the younger and dumber you are, the higher percent that you of voting for Democrats. The older, more mature, and smarter you are, the lower percent chance that you're going to vote for Democrat, with the exemption of scientists. Only 6% of scientists vote for Republicans. All the rest vote for Democrats, typically. So what this has created is they've created a racial caste hierarchy. It's incredibly racist. So these people claim to be anti-racist. They claim to be against racism, but what they've done is they've created. So this is based off of the 5-tier racial caste hierarchy that you might be familiar with, where they put the white male on the top of the social hierarchy, the white woman below the white male, the black male above or below the white woman, and then the black woman below the black man, and then all of the other races in any other order that you want to maintain the racist caste system. So the Democrats' solution to this, so first off, Democrats they owned slaves, and they started the KKK. They were the ones that opposed women's suffrage. So in order to make up for this, the Democrats created a 4-tier racial caste hierarchy because it was more leftist. It was a flatter social hierarchy. So what they've done is now the poor whites are now on the bottom. And above them are the hood Democrats. So what the hood Democrats are, is the Democrats started the KKK. KKK were hoods. And the hood Democrats are the people who live up in the hood, up in the big cities, who vote for Democrats. Okay, and so these people are the huge bars that you see down here in the lower right-hand corner are the hood Democrats. They're the low-income, big city people. They got high crime rates. They got high drug abuse rates. They've got high rates of misogyny, men using women like sex objects, knocking them up, leaving them, high rates of fatherless homes, a lot of gang violence, a lot of crime, a lot of opiates, fentanyl overdoses. So all of these blue bars here are the people who vote blue no matter who. And so there are the hood Democrats, they get the diversity tickets, and it's because the corporations, they don't want to hire the black guys because their GPAs aren't good enough. They got like Asians in control, and they got white chicks who got really good grades in college, and they won't hire people with low GPAs, and they're really racist against the black guys. So they claim that they're against racism, but when they're walking down the street and they see black guys walking down the street, they typically go on the other side of the street. So in control of the ivory tower is a metaphor for an extremely racist, corrupt power structure that the Democrats invented because they owned slaves and started the KKK, and they used to like to go kill endangered species to get whatever those carcasses, animal carcasses, on their walls and get their ivory. And so they built this ivory tower power structure. And so in order to rise up to the top of the ivory tower, where the ivory tower liberals run the top, you need to either have a GPA that will get you up here, because only 6% of scientists vote for Republicans. So almost all of them are Democrats. So the people running the top here, they're called ivory tower liberals. Okay, and so ivory tower liberals, they live in gated communities. So they only let in Latinos to mow their lawn. They claim that they're not racist, but they only let Latinos in their gated community to mow their lawn. And they won't let the black guys mow their lawn. So the white feminist, that's the racist version of feminism, where you put the white woman at the top. If you do not toe the party line, these people are white feminists. So the reason for this is because if you don't toe the party line, they can cancel you, they can fire you, and get rid of you. So it's a method for them to maintain control over the extremely valuable money source that is the ivory tower. So if you want to move up to the top, you have to engage in this white feminism, because white feminism is where you put white women's issues above everyone else's. And that's because the white woman in this pyramid of victimization, the white woman is the most victimized of the entire group, because the white woman has been raped. So this puts the white woman's pain above the black guys, above the Latinos, above the incel Indians, above the poor whites, because the guys all want to get down the white woman's pants. They all want to know the white woman's girlfriend so that they could hook up with their friend, because they can't fraternize at work. So the hood Democrats, they tend to get jobs in the ivory tower at the lower floors of the ivory tower, like cleaning jobs, like janitors. They're the low paid workers. So if you want to graduate and move up to the top, you got to be a white feminist. And so this is a white feminist. An example of a white feminist is like if you hired someone with an African American studies degree or a women's studies degree in your HR department, to fire the white dudes to hire more women and minorities so you can have a more diverse workplace. They hire these people. So you move up from the janitor, the low paid, unskilled laborers in the ivory tower at the bottom floors, in order to be the white feminists in the human resources department. So this is how they sneak in and how you get this critical race theory BS where they convinced everybody that white people are bad and that they took the land from the American Indians. And so if you want to get to the top, you got to be a Democrat because only 6% of scientists vote for Republicans. And you have to have a good enough GPA. You have to make enough money to where you're in with the rich white kids and all the really smart kids in college. And then once you have been indoctrinated into the doctrine of diversity, where you believe that white people need to be replaced from work places because all white teams are inferior, then you have graduated up to white feminist, where you are qualified now to work in the human resources department and replace white people with minorities and women because of diversity. Fuck yeah. All right, so they claim that white people are racist, and there's what they're saying is that white people are responsible for slavery, and that we enslaved the Africans, and so we're supposed to have what is called white guilt or white shame, and we're supposed to feel bad. We are supposed to carry the burden for the sins of our ancestors. And so this is called anti-white racism. So here's a chart from a study, and where was it at? American National Election Studies, preliminary release. I mean, you're going to have to look that up. Okay. I found it from some lefty dude on Facebook, right? So these in this study plot below reports mean rating of whites, blacks, and Hispanics, Asians of whites, black, and Hispanics, and Asians using data for preliminary releases of the 2020 ANES time series study. And so what this showed, they asked the white people, what do you think of all these different races? And so they just rated them all the same, right? And then they asked the black people, and they were like, oh, they don't like white people, and they like black people, and they don't like Latinos, and they don't like Asians, right? And then they asked the Asians, and then the Asians don't like white people. They like the black people more than they do the Hispanics, and they like other Asians more. So what this chart shows you is that the white people are actually the least racist of all the people. So they've been shaming us as racist. They've been saying that we are the ones that are responsible for slavery. And then it actually turns out to be a bunch of BS the entire time. It was not true. So in this next chart here, going down the gamut of the intellectual dark web, what we're going to see here is immigration data. And so here is a chart from the U.S. Census Bureau. It's entitled U.S. Population 1900 to 2016, Population Projections 2017 to 2060 by Immigration Scenarios. And what you can see is that if we restricted immigration by 2060, we would have a population of about 376.2 million. If we had a medium immigration, which is like the projected population, we would have about 404 million people. If we left immigration unchecked, we would have 446 million people. And without any immigration, our population would go down to 319 million people. So what does this chart tell you? This chart tells you that the vast majority of Americans immigrated here after the Civil War. You can see very clearly the numbers here are skyrocketing from 76.2 million over here to 320 million. Okay, the vast majority of Americans immigrated here after the Civil War. What does this mean? It's not physically possible that white people are responsible for slavery. Why? Because they immigrated here after the Civil War. Where did they immigrate here from? Most white Americans immigrated here from either Germany or Ireland. Germany is a landlocked country. They never engaged in the slave trade. It was the countries that lived that were around the coastal areas, you know, like England, Spain, Portugal. They all had boats. And so they went over to Africa where they invented slavery at. So like one of the first things a human ever did to another human was enslave them. The Africans were the inventors of slavery. And all throughout history, and even to this day, there are countries in Africa that have a higher rate of slave ownership today than like Niger, than at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. At the height of the transatlantic slave trade, approximately 6% of white people owned slaves, and about 0.1% owned more than 100 slaves. So very few percentage of people owned a large amount of slaves. A lot of them were indentured servants. And a lot of these indentured servants were people who were dying from famine. There used to be famines that used to wipe out massive amounts of people. And then you would get these people who were starving to death, and then they turned into slaves. So the white people who lived along the coast, like English people and the Portuguese and the Spanish, they went over and they traded with the Africans. And there was these like slave traders that have been slaving Africans ever since the dawn of humanity. And these slaves, a lot of them were starving to death. And they went over to the New World. Some of them were like, that sounds so cool, I want to get on your boat. And also, too, a large percentage of these people during the period of time that they would have been on the boat and went over, they would have been in just as bad a captivity. And they also would have had the same percentage of people who would have died from various diseases, because diseases were in famines and were all over the place, man. There was genocides. People were mass slaughtering people. So this narrative that white people enslaved black people is just absolutely false. So we've had this Wikipedia article, this far right stuff. So what happens is we get an echo chamber, a circular referential echo chamber with journalists. So what happens is people write stuff on Wikipedia, and some of this stuff, people believe this stuff. Some of this stuff is like Chinese cyber war soldiers sitting in some huge, vast office in China, hacking away, doing cyber warfare, stealing our IP, modifying Wikipedia, flagging posts critical of the Chinese Communist Party via VPN. And some of it is our own CIA and FBI who are controlling the narrative on critical information related to spy cases involving specific people who have Wikipedia pages. As you can obviously tell, the CIA and the FBI need to have presence here. So you've got the deep state, you got these people, they're Democrats that live in and around Washington, D.C. area, who have a crony network, who are anti-racist, because there's a lot of black people there, and they'll fire you if you're racist. They have the Civil Rights Act. They can't hire anybody who's racist. And so there's a crony network of anti-racist people working for the federal government. There's these far leftist universities. There's the Chinese Nazi party pushing cyber war propaganda. There's a hodgepodge of all these influences that are editing this Wikipedia page. So what they've done, this is very tricky. There possibly could be cyber warfare going on this page through psychological warfare in order to do multiple non-traditional warfare attacks against us. So we've got the expansion of the definition of far right. And I'm not claiming I know who's responsible, if it's the wingnuts from the far left university or the Chinese. I'm developing a tool that'll help us. It's called WikiSpy, and basically an AI tool that monitors Wikipedia. And you can contribute to, hit me up, DM me on Facebook. So what they've done is they've expanded the definition of far right. It used to mean it was like Nazis or people like the KKK who would keep black people segregated and they terrorize them. Like if you're being authoritarian, you're terrorizing people. You've got concentration camps. You've got some ethno state, like a Islamic state that's like doing public executions, Sharia law where they're chopping off people's heads and hands. That's all called far right. So what's happened here is by expanding the definition of far right, what you've done is you've increased the size of the group of the far right. So what you can do to weaponize this is you can also increase the size of the group on the far left. And you can also utilize what you do to do cyber warfare, to do exterminations of cultures and ethnicities through cyber warfare, non-traditional warfare campaigns like the Chinese Nazi Party's been doing. What you do is you can utilize immigration, you can utilize attacks on our cultural institutions. These are like playbooks from the Chinese, from the Cultural De-Evolution, aka the Cultural Revolution. So this playbook invented by Mao Zedong to annihilate cultures, what they do is they target they target the dominant group of people. And so they do this by attacking their culture. So what they do is they label it as racist, as reactionary, as far right. In fact, we even had we went through that list of the Chinese genocides. Oops. List of massacres. And from the Cultural De-Evolution. So it started out here with the 1949, Mao Zedong got elected, took out the landlords. Then this caused mass starvation after that. And then we go up into the Cultural Revolution, and they start attacking cultural institutions. So, for instance, like they in the 1967 to 69, they mass slaughtered Mongols. So they take out an ethnicity of people. So what they do is there's multiple methods that you can do to annihilate cultures. So first, you can use immigration in order to flood their region with your ethnicity or a competing ethnicity that is not as much of a threat to them. And then it overwrites your ethnicity, removing the culture that's preventing them from having their Marxist utopia or fascist ethno-state, if you ask me. So what they've done, they've said here in this far-right politics thing, they've said that anybody who supports nativist ideologies, you're in the far right. So what does this mean? Political policy promoting the interest of native inhabitants against those of immigrants, including support of immigration restriction measures. So what they do is they create a circular referential, journalists create circular referential references. Circular references, where one party will edit Wikipedia. And so they'll include these things. And so in order to know what far right is, you have to go delve into you can't just look at this. It's not just clear cut. Like I can just look at this and know what far right means. What you got to go through is you got to go through and look at what the other things is. You hover it over it and then pop up. Okay. And this is the expansion of the scope. The definition got expanded. And so what they do, they say any sort of immigration restriction measure is far right. So what this does is it causes journalists who read Wikipedia to develop a worldview based upon the completely unscientific, incredibly biased stuff that they're finding on Wikipedia. And then they write stories about it. And then what you'll see is that you'll end up getting references from things like the New York Times, right? Like rise of Donald Trump tracks growing debate over global fascism, New York Times. So what happens is once it started out with just some crackpot or a Chinese spy or a CIA agent or a government official who hired a PR agency to scrub their Wikipedia presence to make it look good, to control a narrative. There's a lot of different players that are doing this on Wikipedia. And what they've done is they've created the false narrative through putting this stuff on Wikipedia. And then the journalist will write articles based on the worldview that they got from the Wikipedia. And then once they've done this, now they go back to Wikipedia and they reference the story like from the New York Times here as the reference as to why the article is legitimate, creating a circular reference. So this stuff's made people gone crazy. So this stuff goes between America, which has one set of political ideologies. Then you've got Europe, which has another set of political ideologies. Australia's got another. Then you've got Asia, which has a whole bunch of different political ideologies. And you got the predominant ideologies, the Chinese Nazi Party or the Indian RSS. So so in order to control our the number one enemy is the white guy, because we're the ones that are the biggest competition. Chinese Nazi Party needs to show the people in China that they're doing a good job so that people don't overthrow the Chinese Nazi Party, because they're genocidal maniacs. They've been mass slaughtering people for almost a century. And so instead, what they do is they say, no, it's not us that is the problem. It's the racist people. The racist people are the problem. They're the ones that are preventing us from having our communist utopia, because they're racist. They won't share with the minorities, and we need to take them out by any means necessary. And so what they've done is they've propped up a cyber war against us. The Chinese military has been engaging in cyber war against us. It's not some crackpot theory or anything. It's been on the news for quite a long time. There's Chinese spies have been going to jail. They've got the Uyghur genocide going on. And so you look at the number one thing here on this list. What does it say? That far right means you're against communism. Anti-communism, a political movement and ideology opposed to communism. So like the United States, I guess we fought in World War II against the Nazis, and then we also fought in Korea and in Vietnam against the communists. We had the Cold War. So we fought both of them. We're anti-communists here in America, so that means apparently we're far right. So what this does is it allows the government there in China to control people by saying that you're racist if you don't support the Chinese Nazi Party. Meanwhile, they're committing genocide against the Uyghur Muslims to annihilate their culture off the face of the planet because they don't bow down to Zinni the Pooh and Chinese National Socialism. So what else did they put in here? There's another one that's important to know about this. They're saying like homophobic, transphobic, reactionary views. It's like, these things are so subjective. Like, what is transphobic? Does that mean that like you're not sexually attracted to trans people? Does that mean like you're not pansexual? You think that women have uteruses, that gender is a biological construct, that when people are forcing you to use a specific gender pronoun, that they're doing it to control your mind, to control whether or not they can get rid of you if you don't comply. So this is the problem with this, is that people they'll take anything that they can use to attack people, and they're going to attack them. If people know that if you cross the trans person, that means that they can take you out If they don't like you, that means that they can use this as an excuse to get rid of you. It's called cancel culture. You've probably heard of it. So where is cancel culture prevalent at? Where is there the most cancel culture at? Authoritarian dictatorships, Chinese Nazi Party, the Islamic State. People will cancel you. Why? Because it allows them to get back at their enemies. It allows them to punish them. So the Chinese government has been putting out a lot of anti-racist propaganda, and that's because it allows them to target the people who are their number one competitors, dare say enemy. It allows them to say, this corporation does not have someone who is diverse, quote unquote diverse, on their board, so we need to get rid of this corporation. Our competition, we have to get rid of them. This person is a white male. There's too many of them. And so we need to replace them with a younger, more diverse person. Because apparently, like, diversity is the color of your skin or something. See, these people, they're into what is called the doctrine of diversity. What this means is they did some studies that showed that diverse teams are more productive and more innovative. So the racist white feminists that are at these Democrat-run corporations in the height map here, they, sorry. Forget what I was saying. Sorry. So what it is it allows them to maintain control. So it allows them to minimize their labor costs. So the reality of the situation is these corporations are apolitical. They don't have any preference on politics other than the one that gives them the most money. And these corporations want to expand into China. And in order to do that, they cannot criticize the Chinese government. And they have to toe the party line. So even if you get a product manufactured in China, if you're utilizing the Chinese slave labor or the communist slaves, then if you criticize the Chinese government, they'll pull your funding, they'll cancel you. So the people in the workplaces are one of the most authoritarian places in the entire world. The very notion of the workplace is you do exactly what you're told, or they fire you and replace you with somebody who will. This is in authoritarian countries. If you, when you get fired, you might go to a concentration re-education camp. That is the difference. Here you just get fired. So they want to all point fingers. They're doing they're using GPAs that they know discriminate against blacks in order to determine who gets more money, the top positions in the ivory tower. And they're not hiring the black people. So this is, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can kind of say it's racism. I'm not sure. Okay, so I used to work as a minority outreach advisor for Portland State University. At this job, I went and I recruited minorities and women to replace the white guys. And my boss was a Latina. And, you know, there was people from all different races on the team, half women, half men. I was the old white dude. That was my claim to diversity, I was the old white dude, ironically enough. And so my Latina boss told me we weren't looking for the black kids to recruit the black kids because their GPAs weren't good enough. We were looking to recruit the Latinos and the women and the Asians. And I didn't think anything about it at the time because it was a diverse crew. But This graph tells you exactly why they were doing that. And it's because it's a reality. Is it racist? I don't know. Where do these people live getting the bad grades? They live in big cities, right? So like immigrants will congregate in big cities. And so this is trying to, I know there's a lot of rabbit trails here, trying to keep the focus on what we got here, the white feminists and how they're supporting ethno-nationalist Chinese Nazis and they're Nazi sympathizers. So they're saying there's all this confusion of what is far right, what is far left. And so the people in the cities, what you get is you get these, when you have a bunch of illegal immigration, you get a bunch of races congregating in big cities and they don't assimilate. You get like Chinatown, or you get like in LA, like a third of LA is from Mexico, doesn't speak English, and they take over a certain portion of the city and they become the permanent underclass. So in the context of left versus right, far left, far right, by allowing a lot of immigration in, you're actually creating a steep social hierarchy. So here we can see some pictures from the border. Here we could see this huge wall built by Donald Trump that Biden is saying that he's going to continue building. You could see it doesn't really help if the wall stops because people can just walk around the wall. And there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of kids here. There's like a lot of kids here. Here we could see pictures of huge warehouses that Biden has kids in cages wrapped up in Mylar blankets. This is one of the less crowded images. Here we can see little kids with Mylar blankets in cages in huge warehouses. So they ran out of room in the warehouses to stick the kids. So they just stick them out under bridges. They just like rope them up and they stick them underneath bridges. So you can see here Mylar blankets pretty much everywhere. And they got rid of the wire cages because they were bad optics. So they replaced the wire cages with these clear plastic because somehow that's like different. Here we got a picture of an overcrowded holding pen. You could see there's like hardly any room to sit down. People are like laying on each other. Yeah, here's a picture of a child being rescued that was in danger of drowning. Him and his... Is that a sister? Is that a backpack? I don't... What is that? Sorry. There's another one here somewhere. Here we can see a Border Patrol agent saving this child. So these people who are human trafficking these migrants across the border, they often will let the kids drown and die. They'll drop them off in the middle of the desert and take off running because they don't want to get caught. The children end up being the victims in the human trafficking operations. Here we can see another picture of the bridge where they have a very, very, very long line of migrants. And what they're doing is they're giving the migrants, they're not even giving the migrants court dates. They're just releasing them into our country. And these people end up congregating in large cities. Here's another picture of the unfinished border wall that would be preventing these people from going across the border. And instead, we're sticking them in cages. I guess that's the more humane thing to do, is to stick them in cages and then flood them into our large cities where they're going to be dependent on government handouts. And then they're going to be a permanent underclass. Here's some migrants crossing the Rio Grande. And what you've done is you've created a steep social hierarchy. So these leftists who are trying to say, oh no, we're trying to flatten this social hierarchy, what they ended up doing is they created a mass economic migrant magnet. In New York, they just passed a law there that is going to give $15,600 to illegal immigrants who were affected by like COVID wages losses. And so what this is going to translate into with the human smugglers is the Americans are paying you $15,600 to move to the United States. You just pay me $5,000 to smuggle you across the border and you can have the money. That's why we call it a magnet. You end up with these human smugglers like this guy. He just goes back and forth, gets money, takes the money from the people, takes them across the border. They got cartels, MS-13, terrorist drug gangs, mass slaughtering people. Oops. Sorry. You got the kid, they like got these people climbing this absolutely huge wall, massive, like a lot of people climb up the wall and they're falling over the other side. A lot of people are getting hurt, getting paralyzed, losing their lives. And so this is what the media was saying, that these were the picture of the cages, that this was a protest back in one of the, like before one of the election, or sorry, I don't know when the protest happened, sorry. But they said this is what they were pretending like the kids in the cages were. And so they're saying that Donald Trump is this racist because he's trying to keep kids in cages, while at the same time he's trying to build a border wall to prevent the kids from crossing the border, so that we don't end up with situations like this, where the illegal immigrants are swimming across the river and then they drowned with their children, like in this image. So when you do stuff like this, you create a far-right system where you have a division, where you have one party. Here we have the blue group. We can see the like the blacks and the Hispanics living in the big cities, the hood Democrats. We get it so that they're on one side, and then everybody else is on the other side. All the rest of America, it's us versus them. And the people who are in control, these Democrats who run these big corporations, and people think it's Republicans running these corporations, that it's like Republicans are rich because they are conservative and they wear good clothes or something. This is crazy. There's no truth to this, dude. No, they're conservative because they're like religious. They're like live out in the country. Like they has nothing to do. They're not running the corporations in the big cities run by the Democrats. That's not true. But the people who are running these corporations can't tell the people at the bottom, we're not hiring you because your GPA is not good enough. You're a Latino immigrant, so you don't have the qualifications to do this job. No, they have to tell them it's systemic racism. It's the racist Republicans in these poor rural red states, the ones that are the poor low-class whites, the ones that the Democrats hate, the ones that they cancel, the ones that they claim are the white nationalist, the scary alt-white, white nationalist, white supremacist boogeyman, like the misogynists that are mistreating women, like all the bad stuff all put into one. They're doing it because, quite frankly, the people don't live there. They can't say it's us that won't hire you because your GPA is not good enough. They have to tell you it's systemic racism. If they didn't tell you that it was systemic racism, then they would have to say, we're not hiring the black kids because their GPAs aren't good. The Latino kids, their grades are a little bit better, and they don't mouth off to the teacher, and they do their homework more, but they're still like impoverished, and there's still a lot of drug problems with the illegal, like 1/3 of drug trafficking convictions in federal courts are against illegal immigrants. 50% are against Latinos. Latinos make up less than 15% of the population. You do the math, that's over 3 times as much drug use, drug problems, and it's because illegal immigrants, they can't work. So what have you done? You force them to sell drugs. And so what do you do to make up for it? You give them diversity tickets, dude. Why? Because you got to keep your voter base voting for you. If you don't give the voter base the diversity tickets, they're going to boycott your company because you're racist, or they say you're racist, and then they're not going to vote for you. So you have to say that there's systemic racism holding you down in order to keep up this racist power structure, because the white feminists are absolutely not going to be giving up their power, not in any way, shape, or form. The white feminists, they focus on white women's issues above absolutely everyone else's. And so these are, the reason why the hood Democrats can't rise up to the status of the white feminists is because when the white feminists and their white knights are walking down the street and they see the black people, they walk to the other side of the street, because in reality, it's just like the homophobes. The loudest homophobe is typically the most flaming homosexual. It's the exact same way with racism. The person who is screaming about racist people the loudest, is the most racist one in the bunch. We went over earlier that chart that showed how races rate other races, and that the white people were the least racist of the batch. But they'll tell you that's not the truth. And why? It's because who are the people causing the problems to these people? It's the white males, dude. It's the patriarchy. It's the privileged white male that's underpaying the women. They're underpaying the minority. And they're not Democrats. No. 3 and 5 white guys voted for Trump. And then I think the last I heard it was 4 and 5 voted for him last time. So they're blaming the white males because they're all that's bad, because it has to be somebody, right? There has to be this bad misogynist they hate women. They just want to underpay women and minorities and keep the money for themselves because they're part of the patriarchy. They were part of this white privilege, white supremacist, white power structure that's oppressing all the minorities. So they say that women are underpaid. And so here's a chart from Walmart, girlpowermarketing.com/statistics-purchasing-power-women. It's from Walmart. And so if you want to get good information about the economy, you want to go to the big retailers because they spend a lot of money to get this economic information. So what it's going to show you is that women control almost 2/3 of the wealth in the United States. The number's moving up to 2/3, so we just say 2/3. Because by the time everybody knows about it, it's going to be 2/3. Women are holding 2/3 of the college degrees coming out of college. They, about 40% of women out-earn their husbands. They're purchasing 91% of new homes, 66% of PCs, 92% of vacations, 80% of healthcare, 80% of OTC pharmaceuticals, 93% of food, 89% of bank accounts, and 65% of new cars. And so obviously, when you look at the numbers, it obviously shows you that women are not actually underpaid. Women work on average, 50 minutes less per day than men. So men work 60 minutes or 50 minutes more than women per day, but women have 2/3 of the money. They are 85% of every dollar spent in the economy is either spent by a woman, on a woman, or the woman controlled how that dollar was spent. So obviously you could see that by giving women more money, it doesn't necessarily mean that the men and the women are going to end up with the same amount of money coming out of it in the end. So let's go back to the white feminists. What's going on? So the white feminists, they're out here protesting with the black looter mob. So that's the people who are rioting. It's different than the Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, the idea is, can't knock on that. But the black looter mob, anti-fascist Nazis, or BLAM-N, this group of people has been out race rioting in the streets with the white feminists. Why on earth are the white feminists out race rioting all summer long with black looter mob? The answer is because they want more money. It's an equality movement. See, these people, they're out there protesting for equality. It's an equality movement. They're not out there protesting to change laws in their local state that control whether or not police can use guns in certain ways and treat suspects certain ways, like the laws that are responsible for the police brutality. They're not trying to address these things. No, the race riots were specifically anti-Trump protests. They're out there all the time saying Donald Trump is a racist bigot. He's putting kids in cages. He's trying to build a race wall to keep out the Latinos. And so, like, where on earth does this come from? Comes from journalists in the mainstream media who put out articles based upon information that they get from Wikipedia that generates a circular reference here. So the journalists will get information off of Wikipedia about what they think is far right, men's rights. If you go look at men's rights is the male version of feminism. And it says it's a branch of men's movement. MRM is particularly consists of a variety of groups and individuals focused on general societal issues and specific government. This has changed. So it used to read men's rights is a far right. And then down here it claims it's misogynistic. So this has been updated. It's better. It used to straight up say men's rights is like a far right movement of like misogynist. There's no telling when this page is going to get reverted back to its former state. Let's look at Manosphere. Manosphere, a collection of websites, blogs, online forums promoting masculinity, strong opposition to feminism and misogyny. Movements within the Manosphere include men's rights movements, incels, men's going on their own way, pickup artists, fathers' rights group. Manosphere overlaps with the far right and alt-right communities. Has also been associated with online harassment as well as mass shootings and other real-world acts of violence. Has been implicated in radicalizing men into committing violence against women. Okay, well, let's look up Islam. Okay, do we say anything about radicalization? Nothing about radicalization. Sharia law is far right. Anything about far right in here? Why isn't there anything about that in there? Why? Because Muslims are a minority group, right? Right, Muslims are a minority group, so that means that they're protected because why? white people are racist. White males are they're part of a patriarchy of white supremacists that have been oppressing minorities and women. They don't say anything about terrorism. You know, they say, since the events of September 11, 2001, Islam has faced criticism over its scriptures and teaching that claimed it to be a significant source of terrorism and terrorist ideology. But notice how it's worded. Notice how it's not worded harshly. It's saying, no, people view this, but it's not actually true. Why? Because it would be silly to judge the entire group based upon the actions of the wingnuts. There's wingnuts in every group of people. There's gangbanging African Americans. There's conservative religious African Americans. They're like, there's like really smart, nerdy African Americans. There's Democrat African Americans. There's anarchist African Americans. There's like the whole gamut. So you can't really like judge the group based off the gangbangers in the inner city, because when you go in the inner city, there's like an equal amount of the white gangbangers doing the exact same thing. So, but it's perfectly okay to characterize this group of people as far right, alt-right. And the reason being, it's because it's the worldview of the people who are writing these articles. It is their worldview that this group of people are misogynist and that they're like incels and that they're a bad group of people that needs to be demonized. But then you start to look down into the weeds of what these people are actually saying, and it's not what these people are saying. Like, yeah, sure, there's some misogynist there, but there's also misogynist in every other act of life. But what happens is that journalists go onto this webpage on Wikipedia because they're looking up a story. They want to write a story and they're going over to look up some facts. So they go over here and they look at Wikipedia and they go, oh, it overlaps with far-right and alt-right communities. So they don't outright go out and say these people are far-right, alt-right, white nationalist, white supremacist, ethno-nationalist, neo-Nazi, fascist. They don't go out and say it. But then you get some journalists that write stories about it. And then next thing you know, they have a source that they can now cite here on Wikipedia to show that their version of truth was true. The reality is that there's been way more terror attacks by Muslims than there have been incels. Like, yeah, there were some guys that flipped out about women and killed some people. This stuff has been going on since the dawn of time, dude. There's also been women who have also flipped out and committed mass murder too, about the stress from guys. It's not a unique thing to guys. It doesn't mean that there's anything dangerous about men. But what these people do is they prop up a boogeyman. So this is a boogeyman. What they've done here is they've painted this picture for you. All right, here's this group of misogynist men. They're in the general population. They could be anywhere. This guy might seem nice, but he's probably a men's rights activist or a pickup artist, or he's an incel. And then the same people who are saying this stuff, they say feminism. They're like, no, these people are misogynist because we're feminists, so we treat women equally, right? Like, okay, well, what if we put up stuff about unattractive women are incels, they're misandrous, they hate men. All right, then now I'm bullying the women, and then what do? They say that I'm a misogynist then at that point in time. So what they've done here is they've got it. So, okay, so white nationalism, this is bad, right? White people cannot, they cannot hold on to America because they're racist, because they enslaved the African Americans. They took the land from the American Indians, even though most Americans immigrated here after the Civil War. And most American Indians died from smallpox, up to 95% of them. So it was like unclaimed land. They didn't have a government. They were nomads. But black nationalism, oh, that's totally cool, right? So if you're a black nationalist, that's cool. Why? Oh, yeah, like what do they got? The Nation of Islam, right? Oh, yeah, no, you can't discriminate against Muslims, right? Because that's Islamophobia, right? Oh, what? Black Panthers, oh, they're pretty cool, right? Right? Those were the good guys, right? Oh no, they're black nationalists. That means they're like far right. That means that like they're like the bad guys, right? Because the white nationalists are the bad guys, right? Because they're the ones that believe that like America has a white identity, right? So that makes them racist, while at the same time, the Black Panther Party, oh, that's totally cool. Nation of Islam, you're just a Muslim. No, there's freedom of religion, man, right? No, we can't criticize the Muslims. Why? Because they're a minority group. Why? Because in America, they're a minority group, right? Well, as it turns out, 1/3 of the world is Muslim. And white people make up less than 1/5 of the world. So in terms of the size of the group of people, Muslims are almost twice the size of the number of white people. So we're actually the minorities and they're actually the majority, because anywhere you go in the United States, you're going to find either there's white people are the majority, or you're going to find there's black people that are the majority, or you're going to find there's a Latinos majority. And then occasionally you'll find Asian majority. But the thing is, nowhere where you go is there going to be the same ratio. Maybe you might find some freak place where there was like the same number of black people in two cities, right? But the thing is you're supposed to look at the whole size of the group of people. You're not supposed to be like, okay, white people can't criticize Muslims because of freedom of religion. And then the Muslims are allowed to criticize the white people, and the African Americans are allowed to blame white people for slavery, even though it's provable that most Americans immigrated here after the Civil War and had nothing to do with slavery. They immigrated here from like Ireland and Germany, and Ireland was victims of slavery, and Germans were abolitionists. But the narrative that they've constructed are that it's just the white people that are bad. And where is this narrative coming from? Well, first, it's popular on social media to say these things. If you say these things, you'll rise up the social hierarchy. People will like your posts. But what it is it's all about control over federal electoral politics. I know this is getting long. I'm going to hop off here. So, damn, I probably lost just about everybody. So the control over federal electoral politics is like this. In order to increase the number of Democrat voters, there's 3 main ways that you can do that. Because people are already chosen Democrat, Republican, or Independent. You can either change a Democrat to a Republican, change a Republican to a Democrat, change an Independent to a Democrat, or an Independent to a Republican. So those are the only methods that you have. In order to do this, you have to add more voters to the voter pool. This is where the Latinos come in. 2/3 of Latinos vote for Democrats, right? Like right here here's the list from the Pew Research Institution, shows percents of people who voted for Hillary Clinton and Trump in 2016. And about 2/3 of the Hispanics vote for Democrats. That is their key. So what they've done is they've looked at Sorry. what they did was they looked at the ages, average ages of people. So what we're seeing here is a population pyramid. Let me go to the website. What the Democrats did was they looked at this population pyramid. What this is it shows you the percents of people in different races born. Here, like we're at 2026. And so what you could see in this chart, here's the white people. Here's the black people. Here's the Asians and the Hawaiians. You can see the Hawaiians are growing. They're not really growing. They're actually staying the same. They just look like they're larger as a percentage. The white people are shrinking. Why are the white people shrinking? We got low birth rate. Also, the African Americans are shrinking. It doesn't look like it's shrinking slower, but the population of African Americans is shrinking. Population of Asians is shrinking. Here it reverts back to it. And then we could see the population of white people is shrinking. So we can also see that there's a bump over here on the age of the most common age. So when they say most common age, they mean whatever most common, like the most number of people with the specific age. The most common age in the United States of a white person is 56. That means the boomers are aging out. Our birth rate's low. Here's the birth immigration. Right. Where we at? So in order to maintain our population, you got to have 2.1 kids. It's just a fact of life. I didn't invent this. If I would prefer just have one kid and be able to maintain my population, but this doesn't work out. You got to have two. So we could see the Native Hawaiians, other Pacific Islanders are the only ones with a birth rate of 2.1. Hispanics are 1.959, except for Native, like ones that are from the United States, have a birth rate significantly lower than that. Black people's birth rate's about 1.79. American Indians, 1.65. White Americans, 1.64 births per woman. Asian Americans, 1.525. So these are not good numbers. This means that your family has, like there might be chemicals around, or it's feminism causing women to work, put off having kids until they're 30 so they could rise up the corporate hierarchy. It's probably a mixture of two of them. There's probably some chemicals. That's what the prevailing idea, the prevailing theory is, that there's chemicals and then there's a mix of women putting off kids until they're having their 30s. Number one reason why they say they're putting off having a kid is because it's too expensive. In the richest country in the entire world, we have some of the lowest birth rates. And you go over to like Nigeria. Like here's the birth rates in Nigeria, and they're having like 5 or 6 kids per woman on this chart. They got like 5.4 kids per woman. So explosion of births over there. And they're flooding into Europe. And so what happens here is that the Democrats need to get new voters. In order to get new voters, they have to come up with them. Either they have to be born or you have to bring them into the country. The strategy that the Democrats have banked on is that they want to use the Latinos. So this is why Biden reversed the Trump border policies, and he's basically paying illegal immigrants to move to the country. He's saying, we're going to give you citizenship, going to give you 100 days. You get up here, then you can get citizenship. And then New York saying, we'll give you $15.6 thousand to illegal immigrants who've been affected by the COVID pandemic, $3,200. If you don't have the documentation to prove it, just make it to New York. They'll give you $3,200 to illegally immigrate there. And of course, this is going to get a massive amount of people to move up here. But what this happens is it ends up creating a situation where these immigrants migrate, they congregate in these big cities, like here where the blue bars are. and then they become a permanent underclass. So this is bad for the Latinos that live here. The Latinos that live here don't want to have their wages depressed. They want to integrate into our community. And also, Mexico is tired of all the transients and the drug cartels with preying on the human trafficking victims. So the white feminists up in America, they're trying to make it sound like if you support Trump's border wall, you're a racist, xenophobe, you're a white nationalist, you have bad motivations, you just want to harm the minorities, you're just trying to, you've got white fragility, you're afraid of your white privilege being taken because you don't want to share any of your white privilege. And it's a bunch of BS rhetoric. They're getting it from Wikipedia. They're getting it from this misrepresentations of this left versus right. The left versus right thing just doesn't make any sense anymore. That's why Rush Limbaugh in the early 1990s started referring to left as liberal and right as conservative because it makes more sense. But you don't, when you get more conservative, when you get more small government, more pro 2A, pro free speech, pro due process of law, it does not turn you into a far right neo-Nazi. You're not far right if you are for small government, because the things that are doing the massacres are the big governments, like this list of massacres in China that we went over, didn't even touch in the USSR. And the going pattern is you get, in the big cities, you get socialists. You get people who don't want to work, who got these crazy theories that they read in some book, some half-baked thing like Marxism that is based on junk data, but they read it. They don't know. They don't have critical thinking skills. They don't know. They don't know anything about economics. They just want to support it because they want to feel good. They want money. They don't want to work for it. So you end up with in the big cities, you end up with large pockets of socialists. Okay, and so these socialists work at a lot of them are either poor, they don't got jobs, or they work at corporations. These corporations have heavy ties to China. For instance, corporation manufactures products in China, has a supply chain there. Company is trying to expand into China. For instance, Disney owns Walt Disney World in Shanghai, generates billions of dollars for Disney. You got Comcast, NBC, MSNBC, owns DreamWorks, has another theme park in Beijing that also rakes in billions of dollars. They're beholden to the Chinese Nazi Party. These companies are run by woke leftists, these white feminists, and they've taken over the ivory tower. So they fire everybody who's or who they say is racist, sexist, xenophobic, men's rights, manosphere, incel, everybody, you're gone. They just want the best of the best. And so what have they done here? They've created a steep social hierarchy where you have what? You got the poor whites, your low-class whites, like your men's rights activists, your Antifa rioters, everybody they want to push down at the bottom. You've been involved in these demonstrations. You're now pushed down at the bottom with the rest of the poor whites. And people above them, the hood Democrats, the low-income big city people who live in the hood, vote for Democrats. They get diversity tickets. So this puts them above the poor whites in the ivory tower four-tier racial caste hierarchy. Above them, you got your white feminists that are towing the party line, put white women's issues above everyone else because the white woman is the most victimized of all the oppressed people because she has been raped. And then if you want to be in the ruling class, you have to have a certain GPA, which means you got to be Asian, or you got to be white, you got to be feminist, you got to be pro-trans, pro-LGBTQA, 2CI, MAO, beep, beep. People that think there's 50 different genders because they've done too many drugs. And if you don't, they get rid of you. Why? Because they've been told all this bullshit about that you got to fear these white supremacist people because they're like Nazis, right? And then they're getting this information from journalists, from teachers who've been in the educational system their entire life. They never left the school. So they developed these narratives like white people enslaved the Africans and they took the land from the American Indians. And so this puts the white feminist along with the black looter mob Antifa on the opposite end from the white guys, the Republicans, the conservatives, and then the white guys are labeled far right, which does one thing. When you expand the definition of far right, it increases the size. So what do? Now you just increase the size of the group on the left, make that bigger. And what you do is you start conflicts between the two groups. You get Antifa to start rioting. You get the Proud Boys to start beating up people up, start rioting, to seize the Capitol. And then you start conflicts between the two groups. You start fights. You kill each other. Like when the Antifa Nazi gunned down that Trump supporter, that Patriot Prayer guy. What was his name? Jay something. I forget. The guy that was Patriot Prayer guy that was gunned down in Portland. Aaron J. Yeah, right. Daniels. Aaron J. Daniels. Right. That guy. So once you people start killing each other, now you got enemies, you got bad blood. And what you can do is you can start ramping this up and start a war here in the United States. So this is where it starts to turn into cyber war territory with the Chinese. I know it's been a long live stream. If anybody's still watching this, you're a champ. The Chinese have been utilizing everything that they can get their hands on to turn into a weapon. So what they've done is they've been shipping fentanyl over through the cartels to kill our people with fentanyl, with the opioid crisis. And so this is a chemical war. So what they're doing is it's non-traditional warfare. You've got cyber war. You've got cultural eradication. You've got delivery of chemical agents. You've got flooding in mass immigrants in order to remove the enemy, the people that you're competing with, remove them with a lower income group of people that are not as competitive so that they can dominate the market. So the Chinese Nazi Party and their mafia of companies that work together can dominate the market. The Democrats have been in bed with these people. You got Hunter Biden has been getting money from the Chinese Nazi Party, also involved in that Ukrainian energy deal with Russians, with oligarchs over there. And you've got Hollywood. Most of their money they're making off of movies in China. So if you want to have the reason why the movies have been sucking so bad recently is they make these movies so they make more money in China. They don't care about the US market. They care about the China market. They pre-screen everything to make sure that they can run the movie in China. Like almost all these big movie corporations are doing it. And they pick certain artists or actors that they can prop up that toe specific lines because they know that they get certain reactions off of them on social media. So you could bring in people with the to watch the movie, new customers, by promoting these radical leftist Hollywood types and fake news reporters in the big media. And then only certain actors are going to be able to be in certain movies in China. If that person has a political stance that is against the Chinese Nazi Party, that person will be removed. You can't have that person in the movie because you have to get past the Chinese Nazi Party bosses, if you want to put the display the movie and make the see, because like they usually just pirate movies in China, so the only way that they can actually make money is off of the movie theaters. So they're trying to bring people into the theaters, and if people are boycotting your movie because the actor is critical of the Chinese Nazi Party, well, your movie has gone bankrupt. So America is last here in this. The Chinese Nazi Party is number one. And why? Because they got that communist slave labor, because they're National Socialists. Because they tell their worker, all the poor people in China that are living in poverty, no, we're communists. We don't have money. Meanwhile, they take the money and they keep it for themselves. So they've got two classes of people. You got your rich, wealthy, city-dwelling Han Chinese, and then you got your poor Chinese out in the countryside that are used as slaves in baby factories, because they had that one child policy in China. They got issues in China with, like, there's too many guys. They got they allege that there's a bad patriarchy, misogyny problem. Although I don't think they have any sort of credibility with any sort of misogyny and patriarchy claims. And so what these people, the black looter mob out here race rioting, what ends up happening is the Chinese Nazi Party says, look at these Americans race rioting. See? They're bad. They're racist. You see, we're the good ones. We're the good guys here because we're not the racist ones. We're working for the Chinese people. Then they just paint the Uyghurs as racist in order to exterminate. Oh, they're just the racist people. We have to re-educate them because they're terrorists, right? That's the line. They're like, oh, they're radical reactionaries, right? Like that list of massacres in China, like one of the first ones here, the campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries. You know, what is the revolution? Oh, the leftists, the people who are trying to promote equality, who are trying to make the world equal by jacking all the rich people and killing them because they won't give up their property. See, that's the problem with leftists. The problem with people who want equality is they think that people have wronged them. And once you think that people have wronged you, then they want to kill. They want to take back what was theirs. They want to get retribution for the people that wronged them. And then they start doing mass slaughters and genocide. And they've been making products with slave labor there in China. And all these black looter mob anti-fascist Nazis, all of them are utilizing smartphones made by Chinese slave labor. Almost all of them. Right? Because you got iPhones made in China, right? They got to put nets outside of the buildings over there where they make the iPhones to prevent the workers from jumping off, you know, over there in the Foxconn buildings. Right? So there's like 3 Asians that died in the process of manufacturing your smartphone. So you better not throw it in the garbage before you get 100% use out of it. But you don't see any of these people protesting about any of this police brutality, the genocide in China. Not at all. No. They're all focused against the white guy. Why are they doing that? Because of the rhetoric the media corporations are putting out. Who controls the media corporations? Corporations who make money in China, like Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg, former mayor Democrat of New York. He has a business that does something in the stock market, and he runs 85% of his booths in China. He's beholden to the Chinese Nazi Party. If he badmouths them, they're out. You got the NBC, owned by Comcast, which owns DreamWorks, which has the theme park in Beijing. DreamWorks Beijing brings in billions of dollars a year. Then you got Disney, owns Walt Disney World Shanghai, brings in billions of dollars per year. the media is rigged by companies that are beholden to the Chinese Nazi Party. Now, not all of them, like that Business Insider one. That one, they're owned by Germans, and they do push some a lot of leftist propaganda, but from what I can tell, they're Germans. So the Germans have always been abolitionists and against racism. The whole thing in World War II was like they were having conspiracy theories. Like they weren't anti-Semitic, and then they treated the Jews the best there, so the Jews mass immigrated there. And then everybody got anti-Semitic all of a sudden with conspiracy theories and scientific racism. And now, currently, you know, they're really anti-racist and super lefty. So Germans have always been abolitionist, anti-racist, never... I mean, hold on. So, where else am I at? So we've looked at most of these slides. We've looked at the Uyghur Muslims. I've explained to you white feminism, how white feminism is a racist form of feminism that puts the white women's issues at the top. And these ivory tower liberals are white feminists and people who work within the ivory tower power structure that now has the women and the Asians and the rich whites at the top up here. And what else is there? Let's look at the stage. Democrats and white feminists are ethno-nationalist Chinese Nazi sympathizers. Chinese are ethno-nationalists. Or not all Chinese, but the Chinese Nazis are ethno-nationalists. They're hyper-competitive. They have a steep social hierarchy. They have concentration camps. They are committing genocide. They have a ruling party that they give inside connections to their family. They have a crony network, a deep state. And they say they claim they're a hybrid of capitalism and communism, where but that by definition is National Socialism. National Socialism is supposed to be a more evolved version of communism, where you can have private property and you can have you can have money, but the government owns the means of production, right? Hence National Socialism. And the Chinese are currently National Socialists, and the Democrats are Nazi sympathizers. They're not saying anything about the Chinese. They're saying if you criticize the Chinese, you're racist against Chinese now. So if you say that they're committing genocide, you're racist. And this is being used as a tool to suppress the Chinese people and to also engage in cyber warfare against us. So in that, I'm closing this out. If you are still watching this, you're a champ. I was trying to make this like a 20-minute thing, but you know, it just happens sometimes. So with that, I bid you adieu. Thank you for watching my personal channel. You should check out RSS commentary. We're currently down. You can check me out on Facebook and YouTube, but videos are hidden right now because I've got too many strikes, but they will be back up soon. We'll got plenty of new content coming soon. So thank you for watching. Until next time, aloha, sayonara, peace be with you, and Godspeed.